for today. Well, Kody calls Isabel and says, hey, how about if we go hang out today before your party? And I almost freaking lost it.
The storm broke the moment Kody Brown stepped forward, shattering the fragile mask that Kody Brown has been parading around in his so-called apology tour. What fans once dismissed as Kody's last desperate attempt at reputation repair instantly became a battlefield when Kody dropped her reality-shaking response. This wasn't the Kody who used to shrink herself, quietly enduring his manipulation. This was a woman armed with truth, clarity, and years of bottled-up receipts. And when those receipts spilled, the Sister Wives community went wild. Thousands of fans flooded forums, Facebook groups, and comment sections, dissecting Kody's every word like detectives who had finally stumbled on the smoking gun they'd been waiting over a decade to see. For Kody, the timing couldn't be worse. Here's a man who spent years publicly humiliating his wives, showering favoritism on some children while neglecting others, and treating kindness like a commodity only he controlled. Now facing the collapse of his image, he suddenly discovers the language of accountability. Convenient? Absolutely. But Kody was having none of it. Her reaction sliced through his hollow statements like a blade, leaving no room for Kody to wriggle out of the spotlight he once craved. Fans called it iconic. Others said finally, and the words echoed with the kind of vindication that only comes after years of enduring lies. The woman who once apologized for simply existing now told Kody exactly where he could file. His theatrics. And the way she did it? Calculated, powerful, and impossible to ignore. The ripple effect across the Sister Wives fandom was electric. This wasn't just casual drama for late-night TV chatter. These were women who recognized the patterns because they had lived them. Mothers who had watched children become pawns. Wives who had received apologies that somehow blamed them. Partners who had been told to be grateful for the bare minimum. Kody wasn't just rejecting Kody's act. She was handing the world a blueprint on how to reject manipulative apologies dressed up as remorse. It wasn't emotional, it wasn't defensive. It was surgical. She called out the tactics, named the gaslighting, and refused to be drawn into Kody's scripted performance. What stung most for Kody was Kody's timing. Instead of keeping this in a quiet therapy room or behind closed doors, she did it in full public view, the exact stage he thought he could control. But when Kody flipped the script, it left him exposed as the same man viewers had seen for years, desperate, manipulative, and terrified of losing the narrative. His so-called apology was revealed for what it really was: reputation management, wrapped in hollow words. And as the community watched, jaws dropped. One truth became crystal clear. The man who once dictated every conversation had just lost control of the story forever. The stage was set the moment Kody Brown decided to parade his apology in front of the cameras, convinced that the world would lap up his tears and his carefully rehearsed remorse. But what he didn't realize was that Kody Brown, the woman who had endured decades of his manipulations, was waiting with precision, clarity, and fire in her voice. She wasn't going to let this performance slide. She wasn't going to let him rewrite history. And when she struck back, it wasn't a soft refusal. It was a surgical dismantling of every tactic Kody had perfected for years. The Sister Wives community erupted instantly. Social media feeds exploded with reactions. Group threads spun into overdrive, and fans who had been documenting Kody's toxic patterns for years finally had their vindication. This wasn't just a response. It was a reckoning. Kody, once the silent wife who internalized pain, had transformed into a woman unafraid to burn the very script Kody was trying to recycle. And in that moment, the power dynamic flipped. Completely. Kody had expected sympathy. He had expected people to see him as a misunderstood patriarch, beaten down by life and desperate for reconciliation. Instead, he was met with collective outrage. Kody's refusal to play along exposed his act for what it was: a desperate attempt to rehabilitate a broken image. Viewers pointed out how his words sounded identical to the excuses he'd used in the past, lines dripping with blame shifting and self-pity. "I'm sorry you felt hurt, but I was under so much pressure." Classic Kody, classic manipulation disguised as contrition. Kody didn't fall for it this time. She called it exactly what it was: damage control. Her words were calm, deliberate, and stripped of any performative emotion. No yelling, no drama, just facts. And that's what made it so devastating for Kody. Because when someone calmly exposes your manipulation, your power evaporates. His usual tactics, gaslighting, playing the victim, spinning his narrative, suddenly had no oxygen left to survive. What fans loved most was Christine's clarity. She didn't just say no. She explained why his apology wasn't real. She broke down the manipulation playbook he had been running for decades. The dismissiveness, the victim playing, the guilt tripping, the half apologies that were never really apologies at all. She laid it bare, and once the truth is out, you can't put it back in the box. The forums exploded with comments. "This is a masterclass," one viewer wrote. Another said, "Christine just gave every woman watching the courage to never fall for fake apologies again." It wasn't just entertainment anymore, it was empowerment. Kody's shock was almost laughable. After years of training his wives to accept crumbs, he genuinely believed Christine would fold. He thought she would melt at his words even now when he was cornered and exposed. But instead of gratitude, he was met with resistance. And that resistance shattered him. The irony was delicious. The same man who once punished his wives for showing emotion was now weaponizing his own tears, only to have them thrown back in his face. And here's the twist. The more Kody tried to plead his case, the worse it became. Every justification, every excuse, every attempt to reframe his behavior only reminded fans of the years they had watched him degrade, dismiss, and manipulate the women around him. Christine's strength wasn't just in her words. It was in her refusal to even acknowledge his performance as valid. She refused to grant him the satisfaction of debate. She simply identified the tactic and walked away. That's what left Kody powerless. By now, fans weren't just angry. They were celebrating. This was cosmic justice. Karma arriving not in a whisper, but in a roar. Women who had lived through similar dynamics were flooding comment sections with their own stories. Ex-husbands who suddenly found God or found therapy after years of mistreatment. Partners who only apologized when they risked losing their control. Christine had become a symbol, a beacon for anyone who had ever been manipulated by fake remorse. And the timing? Impeccable. Kody's desperate push for forgiveness came right when his reputation was already in freefall, his finances strained, and his family fractured beyond repair. To the public, it looked less like a sincere attempt at accountability and more like a last-ditch effort to save himself from total irrelevance. The man who once held all the cards was now scrambling, and Christine had the audacity to call it exactly what it was. That's what shook him. What Christine did next elevated her from ex-wife to icon. She didn't just reject his apology, she redefined the conversation. She spoke directly to the audience, implicitly telling women everywhere, "You don't owe forgiveness to someone who hasn't truly changed. You don't have to manage their feelings. You don't have to excuse their behavior just because they finally admit some version of wrongdoing." It was a boundary-setting moment so strong that even Kody's most loyal defenders had no arguments left. Viewers coined a term for it, the Christine effect. Suddenly, Facebook groups were buzzing with women sharing their own Christine moments. Times when they stopped absorbing blame, stopped making excuses for someone else, and simply drew a line in the sand. The cultural resonance of Christine's stance was bigger than sister wives. It tapped into something universal. Kody, meanwhile, spiraled. Sources whispered that his frustration boiled over behind closed doors, that he couldn't believe Christine had the audacity to publicly defy him. For a man used to controlling the narrative, it was the ultimate humiliation. His so-called apology tour had backfired spectacularly. Instead of repairing his image, it had cemented his role as the manipulator-in-chief of reality TV. Christine's calm dismantling of his act was only the beginning. Fans demanded more receipts, more truth, more exposure. They wanted to see every layer of Kody's deception peeled back. And Christine, she had no problem obliging. Every interview, every subtle statement was another nail in the coffin of his public persona. What Kody had underestimated was how deeply the audience had been paying attention for over a decade. These weren't casual fans, they were witnesses. And when Christine validated what they had suspected all along, it created an unstoppable wave of solidarity. It was more than just gossip now, it was justice. Christine Brown's voice cut through Kody's narrative like thunder slicing through a quiet night. The man who once strutted across television screens as the confident patriarch of a sprawling family now stood in the ruins of his own empire, clutching at phrases that no longer fooled anyone. His apology tour had been marketed as a grand act of humility, a broken man seeking redemption. But in reality, it was just another performance, another script designed to manipulate public sympathy. What Kody didn't anticipate was Christine turning that same stage into his undoing. From the moment she opened her mouth, you could feel the collective gasp of the sister wives community. Fans weren't just watching. They were reliving years of pent-up frustration and betrayal through Christine's words. For over a decade, viewers had sat helplessly as Kody gaslit, belittled, and strategically isolated the women who trusted him with their lives. Now, for the first time, the script was reversed. The woman he once dismissed as submissive and emotional had transformed into his greatest adversary. Christine didn't shout, she didn't rant, she didn't cry. Her calm precision made the blow land even harder. She systematically dismantled his apology, exposing every hidden layer of manipulation. When Kody said he was sorry for how things turned out, Christine countered with the truth. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry that you're facing the consequences. That single line echoed across social media, screenshots, spreading like wildfire, turning into memes, tweets, and TikTok reactions. For fans, this was the moment of catharsis they had been waiting for. The forums lit up with posts. Christine just ended him in one sentence. Another fan wrote, "This is what accountability looks like. No theatrics, no excuses, just facts." Women shared their own stories of hollow apologies from partners who never truly owned their mistakes, each comment reinforcing why Christine's rejection of Kody's performance was so powerful. Kody, however, was visibly rattled. His body language screamed desperation. Clenched jaw, restless hands, darting eyes searching for validation that wasn't coming. He had built his identity on control. Control over his wives, control over the family narrative, control over the audience. But Christine had stripped that control away. She had pulled back the curtain and revealed the truth. This wasn't growth. It was damage control masquerading as humility. The Sister Wives community dissected every detail. They noted how Kody's apology contained the same deflection patterns he had used for years. Vague acknowledgments, heavy justifications, and subtle blame shifting. I was under so much pressure. I didn't know how to balance everyone's needs. These weren't apologies. They were excuses dressed up as vulnerability. Christine's refusal to accept them was like a beacon, signaling to viewers that they too could walk away from manipulative cycles. What made Christine's stance legendary was how she flipped Kody's narrative entirely. For years, he had painted himself as the victim of unreasonable wives who didn't appreciate him. Now, Christine calmly pointed out that his behavior wasn't accidental. It was a pattern. A calculated strategy to keep the women divided, dependent, and questioning their own worth. She named the gaslighting. She named the favoritism. She named the way he weaponized religion to demand forgiveness while refusing to change. By naming it, she took its power away. Fans began calling it Christine's Revolution. Facebook groups swelled with support. Instagram reels repeated her sharpest lines, and TikTok creators stitched her words into inspirational content about boundaries and self-respect. This wasn't just sister wives drama anymore. It was a cultural moment. Christine had become more than a reality star. She was now a symbol of strength for anyone who had ever been trapped in a toxic dynamic. Meanwhile, Kody's desperation grew. He doubled down on his victim narrative, insisting that he had been misunderstood, that he was doing his best, that the wives hadn't recognized his sacrifices. But every time he spoke, he only dug himself deeper. Christine's calm refusal to engage exposed how flimsy his words really were. Viewers compared it to a magician who had been performing the same trick for years, only to have someone reveal the mechanics behind the illusion. Once exposed, the magic was gone forever. The real twist came when Christine shifted the focus away from herself and onto the bigger picture. She wasn't just rejecting Kody's apology, she was teaching a lesson. Real accountability doesn't come with a but, she said. It doesn't center the person who caused the harm, It centers the people who were hurt. That line reverberated across the fandom, quoted in blogs, podcasts, and even professional discussions about manipulation and narcissistic dynamics. Christine had elevated the conversation from reality TV drama to universal truth. Kody, stripped of his power, attempted to play his last card, the children. He spoke about how much he loved them, how hard it had been for him, how misunderstood his intentions were. But the community wasn't buying it. Fans pointed out how he had consistently favored some children while neglecting others, how he had used their pain as weapons in his battles with the wives. Christine, unwavering, reminded him and the world that genuine love for children isn't about words, it's about consistent actions. And Kody's actions had always told the real story. The karmic energy in the air was undeniable. For years, viewers had watched Kody's arrogance, his smug dismissals, his public criticism of the very women who built his family. Now they were watching him unravel, and Christine was the one holding the mirror. This is what accountability looks like, fans repeated. This is what karma feels like. It was poetic justice in real time. Christine's strength didn't just silence Kody, it empowered others. Women online began sharing how they were inspired to set boundaries in their own relationships. One fan posted, "Because of Christine, I told my ex that his apology wasn't enough. I didn't accept it, and it felt liberating." Another wrote, "She gave me the words I didn't have. I finally understand why his apologies never felt real." The ripple effect was massive, transforming a reality TV feud into a movement of self-respect and empowerment. By the end of that week, Christine's stance had become the defining moment of the season. Kody, once the unquestioned center of the Yes show, had been reduced to a cautionary tale, a man so blinded by his own ego that he never saw the rebellion coming. Christine wasn't just his ex-wife anymore, she was his reckoning.